Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 2, Episode 17, Using Functions with Tonal Patterns.
Welcome to today's episode. So Eric, I've been learning how to audiate giant steps. So this has been on my list for a long time, and I've been wanting to use, MLT to unlock this for a while, and I finally started working on it this week. I've been working on John Swana's giant steps licks. So instead of doing tonal patterns that outline the changes to giant steps, I've been using his licks, which are kind of a combination of tonal patterns and melodic patterns. Anyways, what I noticed while I was making recordings for myself to sing these licks back is that if I played the lick and then played the function, sang the lick, and then sang the lick on its own, so I kept going through that process.
Yeah.
Played the 4-note little section, tonal pattern or melodic pattern, then did it again with a function underneath, then sang it on my own. I found I was singing it in tune, and at this point it's imitation, but I found I was getting it faster than if I didn't have the harmony underneath it.
I know.
And so this led me to start questioning. I mean, we've had this conversation a lot on the podcast, like, okay, we should accompany our students with a harmonic instrument like a piano or a guitar sometimes, and sometimes we don't. But then I started thinking, why aren't we doing this when we're teaching tonal patterns? Why are we not supplying harmony when so for example, like, take all the tonal pattern sets that you normally do, but while the teacher is singing the pattern, have the full harmony being played under it, and then when the student responds, the student does not respond necessarily with the harmony being played, but that's something we can get into as well. So that's the start of this conversation. What does that do to your brain when you hear all that?
Yeah, no, I know. So this has come up with a couple other people that think it's important that you establish something beyond resting tone at the beginning of the sequence of patterns that you're going to teach, or the 2 or 3 easy, medium, difficult pattern that's on your board that day to teach to your class. And you teach the easy pattern to everybody, teach the medium pattern to everybody, around average and up, and then you teach the difficult pattern to the people with higher aptitude. First of all, that's too onerous for me, and it just takes too much time and too much brain power while you're teaching. I can't do both at the same time, like keep track of everything, unless you've really got that system down. I just think that's too challenging. So I teach everybody every pattern, because eventually they're going to have those patterns in repertoire somewhere if they're going to continue to get better, tonally or rhythmically on the instrument or in their voice and whatnot. But if we're talking specifically about tonal patterns here today, that it makes it easier. Tonal patterns, it just having functions makes it easier to understand tonal patterns. Tonal patterns don't necessarily make it easier to understand functions. It solidifies it, but the thing that's easiest is what I do. So the question is, you establish tonality with da 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 da, whatever you use, and or bum bum bum, right? 1 5 1, and once you establish that tonality, when is that tonality reestablished? It might be established in the tonal patterns, but tonal patterns are audiated differently than harmonic functions. Do, mi, so. You would say in major, if I establish tonality first, da 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 da, do, mi, so. You would say, well, that's tonic. Do this. Is that tonic? Do, mi, so. Yes, that's tonic. Do, mi, so. Is that tonic? And ask somebody. And you say, yes. Is this tonic? La, fa, do. La, fa, do. Is that tonic? No. And you've taught them the do, mi, so, right? Like that. So this I don't necessarily, it's in major, it's in C major, and I'm playing C, E, G. That doesn't necessarily mean tonic. If you're just saying do, mi, so, that tonal pattern could be audiated do, mi, so, but.
I was singing fa, that's what I was singing.
Oh, you were singing fa, great.
Yeah.
That could be anything, right? So it could be, it's still do, mi, so, but it's la is the root or fa is the root. Re could be the root. So there are other parameters that affect how do, mi, so is audiated. Now the tonality is one. I didn't change tonality in all those. But when you have tonic, do is the root. Subdominant. That fa could be the root for that. And it's not tonic. Now all of a sudden the function is affecting the tonal pattern. So if the function's affecting the tonal pattern, when you're teaching without adding these extra tones that I'm doing to try to trick people to make a point, isn't it reasonable to assume that, and I don't even think it's an assumption anymore, that if you're teaching tonic and playing tonic, do, mi, so, that sounds so much different than do, mi, so to me.
It does.
It's just different. And children audiate it differently because when I teach these patterns, it's easier for children to have the accompaniment, but then take the accompaniment away.
Exactly.
They're easier to audiate having the function played for them than it is. It's easier for that than to just sing the tonal pattern. They need.
I totally agree, and Eric, I've been agreeing with you for like a year on this, but now when I tried to learn giant steps, and I did this myself with something that's really challenging for me. Right, I'm pushing something I can't do. It was just obvious how much better it was.
So it's easier for you. So and I've noticed it's been easier for children, but this is over 10 years of watching children deal with this, or 15, however long it's been that I've been teaching this way. And it's easier for you. And I've heard other people in the MLT community who I've had really good discussions with about why I do what I do, because it's different than, typical music learning theory procedures or techniques for delivering this. Now, because Gordon developed the first one, people still use what he ordained when people developed the Jump Right In curriculum.
Yeah.
But that ordination doesn't make it the best technique. And this is
I'd like to cover something that you covered. So when we do things like, and we've covered this before, but it's really important for this episode. When you say, okay, kids, we're in major, da 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 da, bum bum bum, and then you teach them do, mi, so is tonic, and then you eventually you do things like bum bum bum. Was that tonic? The problem I have with teaching someone the definition of tonic is they can audiate do, mi, so, and they can sing it and repeat it and all that, but their definition of tonic is just, did they hear do, mi, so? They're not audiating the function, right? So they're not learning to
necessarily
call the function, not necessarily.
Right.
So they're not necessarily.
There are kids that are doing that, but you're not
totally
helping the medium and the lower aptitude kids. And I'm talking about lower, medium, harmonic aptitude kids.
But
and how that interacts with tonal aptitude is different too.
I agree. And the point I want to make here is that just because you teach someone to sing, to audiate a certain tonal pattern and then call it a certain thing, does not mean that they're actually audiating the same thing as someone who's audiating the function and doing that. So,
and it's costing them a whole lot of brain power. What do you call it? Working memory, to listen to three notes, go, oh, that's do, mi, so, which is, right? So bum, bum, that's a generalization skill. Bum, bum, bum. Translate that to do, mi, so in their mind, and then say, oh yeah, do and mi and do and do, mi, so, and so, mi, do. Yeah, all those are, like, some of the lower aptitude kids have to go through that whole process before they can, and then they got to stop and think of the word tonic.
Yeah, and to me, this just doesn't seem like it lines up with anything else that we do in MLT. Everything is audiation based, but when it comes to labeling, giving labels to tonal patterns as functions, we don't teach it through audiation. We teach it through correlation.
Yeah, and tonal patterns are not functions. They're based on functions, but they're not functions.
Now, in some cases, do, mi, so, I think because major is so profoundly easy to stabilize than the other tonalities, and the tonic is easy.
Yep.
There's probably not going to be many kids that are audiating do, mi, so as an
major
extension 9 chord off the fourth.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
But when we start talking about again, I started doing this with learning giant step stuff. All I did was I recorded myself singing the pattern with no harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Then I recorded the function with the pattern, and then I give myself some space on my recording to sing it back. And I think here you could try two different things. You could try singing it back with the function played, and you can try singing it back without the function played. And man, I have a really hard time believing, like, I know I've done an aptitude test, I have high tonal aptitude, and this is making it easier for me.
So when
And so what is it doing to kids that have lower aptitude?
And you're you're not really naming functions because you're way beyond that, right? That's not the point. You're trying to learn a piece of music. And
this is another point. I'm doing this to actually make the tonal and melodic patterns easier to hear in context, because not only do you have the tonal context, you have the harmonic context, and if you're not hearing the patterns nestled in the harmonic context, you're missing out on information.
And the context.
Eric is smiling so much right now.
And in the context of the harmonic rhythm too. And that makes it easier too, because it's not only what the change is, but where the change happens. And so it makes it easier. And so I try to teach tonic and dominant. The easiest way to do that is my yes, no, right? Do you end here? No, because I'm on dominant. Do I end here? Yes, because I'm playing tonic, to something that's very familiar. And once they understand it, yes, no, you can expand that. Now, these are before, of course, the kids don't even need to sing tonal patterns. But if you teach harmonic patterns the traditional MLT way, if you look at the learning, the teacher's manual for how to teach tonal patterns, and jump right in, they learn tonic only after they've sung tonal patterns and then sung those tonal patterns again with syllables, and then after they've been told that certain tones, which is do, mi, and so, are the tones that belong to tonic. Well, like, that's just too much. That's just so much harder. So I can't get a 4 or 5-year-old to do that, but I can get a 3-year-old to do tonic, dominant, subdominant, double dominant on occasion, early, quickly. So it drives me nuts that this isn't bought into more by the people I've talked to.
I can't believe it, and it's totally backwards in my mind, and not only in my experience is it backwards. I mean, Engelman says it's totally backwards, but when I do this on the piano, I teach people how to play a tonic chord by rote. I say, okay, I do the yes no game, and then we're on the piano. I just say, hey, this is yes chord, like this, and then when they're ready for tonal patterns, I point out, like, hey, the yes chord we've been playing. What if I just play it one note at a time? Bum bum bum.
Yeah.
And they're like.
Oh yeah,
and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's obviously."
When you're teaching an instrument, you got the visual, you got the oral, right, and you've got the.
But the point of doing it like that is that when they're audiating the one chord, even though it's being played by rote, and then later I say, okay, instead of playing the one chord all at the same time, split it up. The correlation between the function and the tonal pattern is an audiated realization.
Yes.
But when you do it the other way around, when you say, okay, bum, bum, bum is do, mi, so.
Don't go from the bits to the whole. Start with the whole, go to the bits, and go back to the whole. Whole part, whole.
That's Engelman's claim with this. That's Engelman's claim. And we brought this up on another episode. But why should you teach, like, an example of this in language, when you teach kids the difference between a vehicle and trucks and boats and cars and stuff like that, teach them vehicle first, not the subcategories.
Colors is the first word, and then come the colors. The context for what you're learning. So functions, learn the word functions before you teach tonic and dominant.
Totally. And why do you think people are so obsessed with piano? Because you can do both of these things at the same time on the piano. You can have a left hand on the piano playing the full-blown function, and then the other hand do bum, bum, bum.
And then mix them up.
Yeah.
You can give them a chance to create right away or explore.
So I mean, the real question is what's most efficient? And for me, when I record myself like a 10-minute exercise, like something like a tonal pattern on my iPhone, and I'm going to sing back, I know for a fact I will learn how to audiate it faster when there are functions in the beginning played with it. I eventually want to learn how to I want to audiate the functions without them being physically played. But how do you do that unless you have them played first?
And then
it doesn't make it...
And then you only hear the function and you sing the tonal pattern without anybody showing you the tonal pattern first, like performing so just like I do this with the stuff I'm playing. I play stuff 50 times, it's a particular tune easily 50 times because I'm doing it 3 or 4 times a day. And for how many weeks do I do that, right?
Sure.
And when it's something that it's in my wheelhouse to sing and to imitate while I'm listening to it, like some of it's got some crazy harmonies too, I'm trying to pick out chords by singing tonal patterns over the chords. And that's a real tough inference skill for me. Compared to, right, doing it another way. It's like that's a high order level skill compared to what we want to do to make it easier. And teaching functions first and tonal patterns second is the only way to go. And then when you're teaching tonal patterns, when you teach them, play the function under what you're singing so they can get a harder context. So not only do they have tonal context, but they have harmonic context.
In the last episode where we talked about me learning like these Lydian sharp 2 essential functions with the tonal patterns, in that episode I showed every time I stopped a tonal pattern, dun 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 dun,
you went to some,
I stopped on a note that had the function underneath it, and I'm convinced that is essential.
So what I think you're doing there is you're delineating where you're putting up against the tonal pattern that you're singing when it ends. And it ends on the next down because you're doing that in rhythm. And I'm not suggesting that you always and shouldn't do tonal patterns in rhythm until children have enough rhythm vocabulary to learn licks.
Sure.
And we've talked about learning licks or learning melodies, short melodies, and how those can be strung together.
But I did do the same rhythm for everything. So like that rhythm was not challenging for me.
No.
But I do the same rhythm for everything because I'm trying to zero in on the...
Yeah, no, you've got that so burned into your, whole system. Your hindbrain has got that covered.
I just don't even see what a rational defense of this would consist of, like a rational criticism of what we're saying, because all we're saying is do everything that all the MLT teachers are doing, but just sometimes throw the harmony in there. And I just don't see a possible conception of not doing that.
And it's not haphazard the way I've got it sequenced, but try it, and just tell me what your kids are doing. And if it's no different, then expand your harmonic vocabulary so that the kids have a bigger challenge and find out when you're introducing new tonality that you do it with and without the functions accompanying the tonal patterns. Do I say it's bad to teach tonal patterns the traditional way? We're not saying that at all. I do it all the time. It's just that it's
and
easier.
That's better than 99%
it's easier to
of
get.
What you'll find everywhere else.
You'll get started easier. You get
why is singing
faster.
in a choir so beneficial? Because you're hearing the damn harmony. I mean, that's one of the reasons why. You're using your voice and you're hearing the harmony. I mean... Yeah.
But you're also... people could say, well, you're also listening to the person next to you, and that makes it easier to imitate. And I'm probably like that in a choir.
But there's a lot of ways... What I'm trying to say with the choirs, there's a lot of ways you can go after this. I'm not saying you have to play piano or guitar, or... There's so many instruments that you can do this with, or a choir, or with other people. And I mean, even in Gordon's harmonic improvisation book, he says the best way to learn harmonic improv is with a damn group of 4 people, and you take turns singing the functions and the tones in the functions and improvising over them.
Mi, re, do.
The question is, if I don't have access to a choir, I teach one-on-one. So should I use a piano or not? Like, obviously I should. Like, sometimes, right? It doesn't have to be all the time. But I mean... But
this thing of, like, why are we making it difficult. Now, there's good reason, like when you sing the first note of a tonic, the first note of a pattern, so that you're making a kid make a leap, so that you're helping them retain in audiation what they just heard, so that they can sing it again without trying to imitate. You're forcing them to stop imitation, and that's brilliant. This is not that. This is a different thing. Make it easier. We're not going to learn Lydian sharp too before we learn late, major, and minor through tonal patterns, because that's stupid difficulty, because they don't have the same amount of listening vocabulary. That's why we teach major and minor first, because the listening vocabulary is so much stronger there. Obviously, we got to bump up the minor, but it depends on who you're teaching, because a lot of teenagers, if they're listening to the rock stations, that minor can be easier than the major, if because so much floating aeolian, is that Ron's term? The floating aeolian thing. The subjective tonalities you hear on the radio so much is a better basis for teaching minor sometimes than major. Depends on the listening vocabulary. So you got to base everything on the listening vocabulary. So go look at that first. And then from there, listen to the functions. Take the functions and the harmonic functions and the root melodies and all the things we talked about, harmonic learning sequence. That's not what we're talking about here. Although this is a piece of harmonic learning sequence that I've underrepresented in what I do in my teaching, and what you're bringing up, what made it easier for you to do giant steps, is audiating on top of the functions these tonal patterns, or in your case melodic patterns.
It's a mix of both. It definitely is a mix. There's some of the patterns are just straight up tonal patterns.
Yeah,
and some of them are melodic patterns. But
all right, so you do both, and I encourage more of all of it, except the way that we've been doing it, which is too much difficulty level for a too high. You know what I'm saying? It's harder for kids. It's just harder for kids to do it without the accompaniment. And I'm not saying to teach everything with accompaniment, like even a song. Take the accompaniment away, and they're singing the melody. Now, sing the roots. Now sing, right? And then play the accompaniment with the roots. Now sing the roots with the accompaniment, sing the roots without the accompaniment. Because it's easier, and then you're forcing them to audiate the familiar tune while they're singing the roots at the same time, because it's in time, and they know it's related to this. And when you do tonal patterns, you're honing a specific skill that really hones and helps you master even further the harmonic pattern, the harmonic functions you already understand. You already can audiate the function. This is something
that could be so easily studied. You could take the exact patterns from like.
I've been studying it for 15 years. I don't need to do it. It's just ridiculous.
But see, Eric, this is the thing. Like, I would not even feel ethically okay with running this study, because it's clearly so much better to do this with the harmony. No, I would not want to have a group of kids not.
No, my study's 15 years old. It's like, how do you get validity? Well, you apply the study to the next batch of children and see if it works better than without. And there've been some years where I probably screwed up, kids, but I fixed it. But we lost a month or lost a couple months along the way compared to how efficient I could do it the next couple years. And then I screwed up there. So I've always had this freedom to experiment over the years, and I don't like teaching it any other way, frankly. I'm a jazzer in my method and my techniques, and I gotta dance with the kids, because the kids are way beyond what I think they can do sometimes. And I got pre-K teachers that just cover their eyes when they see me go into yes, no, I don't care. And I'm teaching 3-year-olds, and they're like, this is not appropriate. But they do it. They do it. Not everybody, and I'm not, I'm not expecting everybody to do it, because there's different levels of aptitude, especially harmonic aptitude.
Oh yeah. But I mean, a case in point, like I've been telling you about this student I've had since November. She's 7 years old. We do the yes no game. She's playing piano. She's at the point now where we play major and minor twinkle parallel, and she knows which one to play. If I just play, I'll just play a tonic chord. That's either, and she has to tell if it's major or minor. She's not looking at my hand. She'll just play the right version of the song.
Yep.
And so she's able to tell which Twinkle Twinkle Little Star should I play from just hearing the tonic chord?
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I think if you don't train kids to do that, it's not fair to expect them to be able to do that.
One of the things I used to do when I was teaching piano for a very little bit, I had 2 kids. You want to teach them after school? I said, sure. And, you know, I would have them learn a melody, and I would play the roots with the left hand eventually. And then I would have them play triad, you know, in the left hand. And then I would say, you know, here's a new melody. What should I start with? Should I start with tonic or dominant? And these were middle school kids. And they were just learning the same stuff as every other kid I had, you know. And I would have them tell me what to play. And then I would play it, and they would find out if it matched or not.
Yeah.
You know, and that got them away from, you know, trying to think about stuff rather than audiating stuff.
That's the problem I have with the way that we do it, is because we think just because we're saying tonal solfege syllables like do, mi, so, that we're not being theoretical. But
it is theoretical.
It is theoretical.
It is. It is the way we teach it. It's got
the way we teach it is theoretical because it's not being done through audiation.
It's partially theoretical. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But if you play a 5 chord and you like on your instrument, and then you play a tonic tonal pattern, and you just ask a kid, does that fit? Before they know verbal association,
yep.
I trust that a fuck of a lot more than I trust. And then I trust someone theoretically going, okay, well, I heard do, mi, so, and now the teacher told me do, mi, so.
And then you got to go, yeah. Then you got to think of, and if you already did so, fa, re, and la, fa, do, and you know, and you got those mixing around in your head, like that's how I learned the functions, how to teach those functions. You know, with Musical Learning Theory 2, with Gordon. You know, and again with Beth Bolton, you know, I had to go through those classes twice because they wanted the money. And of course, I wasn't paying for it really, so I didn't really care because they gave me tuition remission for graduate assistantship, right? And I would do, you know, stuff. I would work for being at school. So I got this AB of here's Dr. Gordon, here's Beth Bolton. You know, here the way, you know, and here's the way, you know, she taught this stuff. And, you know, what can I say? It was just different. And it gave me a chance to A-B this and think about it. And I
Sorry, I want to be clear. Beth put the harmony with the patterns?
No. I'm just saying, I'm just saying that I got it twice the Gordon way, but through another lens.
Yeah.
Because she didn't have everything squared up to the way I had learned from him. And that doesn't mean she was wrong, but it didn't square. But I always, when something doesn't square, I'll pursue it until I square it away. And eventually I put them both away and just trusted what my kids did over the last 5, 10, 15 years after that. And then I started to get to the point where how I taught. So this is the progression. The progression of my development into, then I came to Peabody and I had these brilliant kids, and some of them came in so musical, and they're 6, 7 years old, and I had them doing composite synthesis and generalization reading in the first year. And I was just like, wow, these kids they're better than me. And they learned everything I learned in 20 years of school, more than that.
Oh yeah,
It's more than 20 years of schooling and teaching, and they got it down in, you know, a year. And I only had them an hour. I had them hour a week for 32 weeks, and that was it. And I just went like,
you said something though. I want to go back to. You said we should wrap this up quick, but like you said, you know, you watch the kids, you observe the kids, and I think that the principle here is a principle of empiricism. You have to see what actually works. So just because Gordon said, you know, do tonal patterns with no accompaniment, who cares what the guy said? I mean, yeah, we were all respect him and everything.
No, well, you start there. You start there because it's brilliant. The fucking theory is ridiculous.
If empirically people learn better at first with the harmony being played behind the patterns, and then you take it away. Yeah. I mean, I don't care what Gordon said.
In one class, he gave me the direction for the rest of my life. You know, like one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know. Right. So then, and I go in and I dig in harder, and I'm like, how do I adapt this to what I'm already doing? And it took me forever to be any good at it. And I had teachers yelling at me because their classes are, you know, going and complaining about he makes us do this stuff, and we want to sing music, I'm like, you have all these other pulls and influences and like that, but I persevered, and I went to where I could do what I needed to do and be the scientist in the classroom, and I love it. I can't not
I think that's
teach that way, and this is how this got developed. It's just because I got this drive to get things right, because my brother was so much better than me when I was growing up. I had to find something that I could hang my hat on, because he was brilliant at everything, right?
Sure.
And eventually I had to, rise above.
Oh, it's the same with me. I had an older brother, 7 years older. He was a great piano player, and I used to just copy him because I was like, I'm so young, I could copy him. It's kind of, I'm not supposed to be able to do it.
But
I would like to say, though,
I couldn't do anything he could do. Everything he did better.
This is something, there's some F-bombs dropped in here and stuff like that.
Because we're passionate about it.
But we're just passionate about this. Like, I would really like to say, like, obviously, I respect Gordon. He's like one of my idols. I have a picture of him on my wall. And I respect every single teacher who's trying to implement
I got
MLT.
Louis Armstrong next to him,
But these conversations, the space of this podcast is like, Eric and I, like, we're interested in pushing this a bit and critiquing, why are things done the way they are, and that's
because our older brothers were assholes.
But I'm saying, like, the point of this is not to make anyone like feel bad about the way they deliver tonal patterns, or to question their whole sanity around tonal patterns, but like, it's just saying, like, hey, maybe you should try this a different way. Like, Eric said this to I was texting Eric about this stuff that I've been doing, and he was like, hey, maybe you should do it like this and A/B yourself. And I was like, yeah, I should. Right? I mean, and the principle here is of empiricism. Like, I care more about, like, the reason Gordon was such a giant is that he was empirical. And the reason I respect what he came up with is because of the empiricism around and the research around it. Now, he had his own opinions on top of all this stuff, but, like, at the end of the day, that's what matters, is what actually works in the classroom. And there's some interesting conversations coming up about, like, spacing, memory, and stuff like that. But Eric noticing little things like, I could get away with a huge gap with my grade 2 or 3 kids, but the kids that were 4 and 5, I couldn't do this with. And so there's actual observations being made that we have to test for. And even if you're not running a full-blown research study, you can still have a bit of science in your spirit and test the way things work. Try it a couple different ways and see what actually works. Not what you want to work, but what actually works. And that's why when I was learning this giant step stuff, I was like, okay, it actually works when it has the harmony, and it doesn't work as well when it doesn't.
Yep.
I mean,
be yourself. Don't adhere to the rules. Draw outside the lines, so that you can express yourself in your teaching. Because everybody that teaches MLT is their own creator of a curriculum. They're the method. You are the method. You're not. If you're teaching MLT, you're the method. MLT is not the method. You're the method, because you're delivering your own content choices, technical, musical, all across everything you decide to do. Do you have performances? You've got purpose, right? You have recitals for your students. Whatever purpose you have, that's going to go over everything. And if you're using MLT inside that purpose, well, then you're really teaching audiation. So how do you teach audiation? Well, there's a million ways to do that. Just sing, dance, and play. There's right, and then underneath that, they break it down. How are you going to do that? Well, Gordon taught us exactly the steps, the learning sequence, and how to incorporate content. But the content's subjective. Now, once you start doing that, well, how do you get them to understand tonality and meter? Well, through audiation. Everything else, how do you do that? Well, you decide how to do that, and there is a roadmap in Jump Right In. There's other roadmaps with music moves for piano and the guitar, audiate guitar, and Jump Right In instrumental, and there's more choral stuff coming online now. Especially if you just do Jim Jordan, that's that's a whole nother level of
I'd be fascinated to hear Jordan's take on this. I mean, because he's an insane.
I think he said as
choral.
much in part of the interview that we had with him. So, but at any rate, we need to stop because we're going on our 3rd hour here, Beau, today.
All right. Well,
So-
hopefully that's taken well. I mean, hopefully the passion is not taken as an attack. But I definitely am open to criticizing practices. But I'm not criticizing any specific people here. I have no I have no beef
we're
with anyone.
expanding the boundaries a little bit. We're pushing up against the boundaries, and I've definitely busted the harmonic thing a little bit to the point where it needs to be taken into account. And I don't care other than that I get my kids tomorrow, and I get to see what they do, and I'm gonna go from there.
I also think it's important for someone inside the MLT community who knows it to critique its own practices, because there are definitely jazz teachers out there that would say things like play the harmony behind these things. And an MLT teacher could say, well, we don't do that. We sing the tonal patterns unaccompanied. But that jazz teacher may not know enough about MLT to deliver an actual criticism of the practices, because there's so much lingo.
It's a really difficult thing to get your arms around if you don't know music learning theory for a few years, unless you're a completely brilliant person. There are really, really good, I mean, weaving it all together. Jill Reese has another book, I forget the name of it. These are really good resources for helping people integrate music learning theory, but it's more about the how of rather than altering the music learning theory.
I'm much more interested in meddling with why we're doing what we're doing than how.
Gordon only did that. And he was only forced to because that's what people needed. So there's such a cry from the MLT community to like, well, how do I do this? Well, figure it out. He was like, go figure it out. And then they worked for years and years to get Jump Right In the first, and that, wow. I mean, I can't imagine doing that work in that environment because it was such a new thing.
Yeah, I mean, making curriculums is an insane amount of work, and we've talked about this. I think education establishments in general, the school system, don't appreciate how difficult it is to make a curriculum. Because, like, delivering a curriculum is a galaxy away than inventing a curriculum. They are different. I mean, delivering a curriculum effectively is much more like being an actor than someone who's designing a curriculum from the ground up.
I want us all to be thinking curriculum developers with the MLT living in the background, as opposed to MLT being the way that Jump Right In tells you to do it. Because Jump Right In is one of a possible million ways to deliver the method that is included inside the larger context of how children learn music, which is, right? So nail that one. Kick that dead horse.
I mean, and Engelman even talked about this, the problems you have with curriculums versus like big principles. If you take Jump Right In and keep everything the same, but just add the accompaniment thing that we're talking about once in a while, does that system perform better than the original curriculum? That's the only way to validly run this experiment. Because if you change,
they do have accompaniments for those songs. It's just
I mean during the tonal patterns.
Oh, the tonal patterns.
I mean, if you keep Jump Right In exactly the same, but sometimes when you do the tonal patterns, you systematically integrate accompaniment with the functions. I mean, that's the only way you're gonna find valid experiments. Because if you take Jump Right In and then compare it to what you're doing, I mean, there's so much stuff that has changed. There's no valid way to gather data on that. It's too different. I mean, unless your kids are performing so much better that they're just, but it's much more valid to keep everything the same and change a variable. But again, the problem I have with that experiment is like it just seems not worth running.
It's really difficult to get, the reliability and the validity. To have the teachers teach exactly the same except for this.
Oh, for sure.
It's near impossible unless you have 30 teachers teaching it one way and 30 teachers teaching it another way, and then you've got to come up with the money to bribe them to do that. And then you got to hold them accountable to deliver exactly how they're supposed to deliver, and that's impossible because all of a
Even
sudden there's fire
informally.
alarm, there's a shooting across the street, schools are shut down. There's, there's all these things that
yeah.
but it'd be a long study, and it would be
Yeah. I don't think it would be a good study to run just based off what I see.
No, I wouldn't do it.
I would love to informally hear from teachers try to do this, especially at the imitation phase of learning tonal patterns, where kids are singing the patterns with you and with each other before they're called upon individually to do it. I would bet that having the harmony from the beginning there would outperform. I'd love to hear someone try that.
I just don't do anything different. I will never not try to teach functions to even the 1-year-olds. I'm giving the experience of the functions very, very, very strictly, like, this one, and then I go, no, 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 yes, and you want to watch their faces relax. It's like, and they know, all the songs that I teach, and I don't do too many other tonalities when I'm doing the functions. Of course, just major, minor, but boy, you can see it. And I've actually got a couple 1-year-old classes that are singing in tune. A couple kids in the 1-year-old classes, they're all singing in tune, and I think it's a function of the teaching the functions. It has to be, because I'd never had this many kids at that age sing in tune or imitate, but they're really close. I don't know if they're audiating, but they're really close, and they sing that fifth, it's what I'll imitate back to them. And there's some of them really good, really good. And I usually don't get that many kids at 1 and 2 years old to sing, if you heard it, you go, they're singing tonic dominant. There's no question about it. Because I pounded it into them. It's their listening vocabulary. And now it's the part of the performing vocabulary. And that's just going to make it easier for me to teach subdominant, by the time they're 3. I don't try to teach that too much before 2, but because I couldn't get reliable measure on my aptitude measure, So, yeah, that's where Gordon came from. Came from his aptitude, moved into audiation. Audiation, how do you teach that? Well, then he developed these tonal and rhythm patterns. And then he researched that. What are the difficult ones and easy ones and like that. And I think that's a valid way to go. But boy, it's just too much for me to handle when I can do it this way and get way more done harmonically.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should stop there. Our goal of 2 20-minute podcasts a week is failing tremendously. So now you get 2 40-minute podcasts a week.
Is it 40 again? All right. Seemed like 20.
All right. Till next time.
All right.